started here. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar on Community Solar Subscriber Management Portal feature. Please update your Zoom display name to reflect your name, pronouns, and company name. And thank you again to everyone who has taken the time to join the session today. We'll go ahead and get started by introducing today's presenters. First, I'd like to introduce myself and others from the program administration team. My name is Alex Rodriguez, Marketing Manager here at Energy Solutions. We also have Megan Uchida, Senior Project Manager on the Contracts team, James Marin, Senior Product Owner on the IS team, and Jess Ballou, the Sector Strategist for Community Solar. We're also very thankful to have the Illinois Power Agency with us today. And I'll now pass it to Megan, who will introduce today's session.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. Before we review today's agenda, I'd like to just share a few housekeeping items. First, everyone will be muted during the presentation. Please use the Q&A box for questions, but please keep questions on the subscriber management portal feature, and we'll answer as many questions as we can verbally during the Q&A portion of today's session. And lastly, a video recording of the webinar presentation slides and post-webinar Q&A will be published at the program website following the webinar. All right, so today's agenda includes an introduction to the subscriber management portal feature, a live demo, an overview of program support and resources, followed by a Q&A session. All right, next slide, please. And one more slide, please. Thank you. All right, so what is the subscriber management portal feature? It's a new feature that allows management of community solar subscribers to move from SharePoint to the Illinois Shines portal, effectively centralizing access and improving subscription management permissions. AVs and designees will be able to view and manage subscriptions, view unsubscribed completed disclosure forms, import and export subscription data, and AVs specifically will have the ability to manage project permissions and assign designees to projects. The benefits of this feature include increased process efficiency, data centralization and standardization, self-service permissions, anytime access, and subscription history tracking. Next slide, please. Thank you. The direction of this feature has been guided by the IPA and the Subscriber Management Working Group from start to finish. The Subscriber Management Working Group is comprised of a handful of AVs and designees who have generously agreed to share their valuable stakeholder perspectives and insights regarding the functionality of the feature. When this project was initiated back in January of 2025, the program administrator held a 1-hour working group session, which generated strong participation and critical insights, supporting further development of the feature's functionality. In April of 2025, the program administrator sent a follow-up survey to the Subscriber Management Working Group to gather additional input and feedback on the portal design. And then more recently, in January of 2026, several AVs and designees from the Subscriber Management Working Group participated in a live demo and portal testing session for the new feature. This testing session was conducted to ensure that the final product met the real-life needs of the end users. And the feedback gathered from this testing session was evaluated for feature improvement opportunities, which resulted in several development enhancements that serve to strengthen the feature's functionality. All right, next slide, please. All right, so what's changing? Essentially, subscriber data will move from SharePoint to the program portal starting March 2026. Regarding AV responsibilities, AVs will be responsible for historical subscriber data reporting and completing subscriber verifications at different intervals throughout the REC contract. So that includes Part 2, quarterly reports, semi-annual verifications, and annual reports. Next slide, please. And that concludes the feature introduction. Thank you for listening, and I'll now pass it back to Alex to play the demo of the portal functionality.
Thanks, Megan. Give me one moment to pull that up.
We're going to explore the new disclosure form dashboard. Number 3, we're going to give a high-level view of the project's dashboard. And then number 4, we're going to do a deep dive into the subscriptions dashboard, because this is sort of like the main dashboard where we do all of the work in subscription management. And then number 5, we're going to show you the new project delegation dashboard. This is a really cool dashboard where AVs will be granting permissions to designees and allowing them to view and edit subscriptions on their projects. And then lastly, we're going to make some subscription changes. We're going to create a subscription, we're going to edit a subscription, and then we're going to terminate a subscription. And then in the process, show you the validations that are related to doing that. So let's get started. Okay, so this is my dashboard, right? This is my main dashboard. This is my main screen. And as you can see, I don't have any new menu here. There isn't a new menu here. And so what I'm going to do is off to the left here, I'm going to grant this user, myself, permissions to view the new menu. So let me do that. All right, that is done. So let me refresh my page. Ah, there we go. This is the new CS subscription management menu. And a quick note, in order to view this menu, you would have to be a subscriber agent. However, if you are not a subscriber agent, you're going to want to request permission. So you're going to reach out to the PA and just say, hey, can I get access to subscription management? All right, so let's get into this new menu. As you can see, there are four submenu items here. We have the disclosure form dashboard, we have the projects dashboard, we have the subscriptions dashboard, and then we have the projects delegation dashboard. Now let's just dive into it. In this dashboard, you're going to view all of the disclosure forms that are associated to your account. So this is all disclosure forms that you would normally view on the other disclosure form dashboard. Something also to note is that we're going to see some data that says confidential, and this is just a scrambled database. It's scrambling the data and it's making sure that none of the information that you're seeing today includes any personal identifiable information. So no PII is being shown here. But again, this is the dashboard, the disclosure form dashboard. And on this dashboard, you're going to have a bunch of columns. And these columns are going to look fairly familiar to you all. For example, you're going to see the subscription size on disclosure form. And this information is coming directly from the disclosure form that's on file. Kilowatt produced, annual escalation rate, payment as percentage of community solar credits. And here at the end is something that I wanted to point out. Is disclosure form archived? So this is a column that you're going to want to pay attention to because this is going to tell you whether a disclosure form has been archived or not. So you can't really filter on this, but you can view that it says, no, this is not an archived disclosure form. Let's scroll back to the left. Something to also note is that these columns are movable. So if you wanted to have disclosure form status at the very front, you could do that. And if you wanted to filter by vendor ID, let's say 49, you can do that as well. But then let's say you wanted to reset all this. You can clear the filters and then you can reset the columns, and any customization would just go away and it would be default. It would be set back to default. You can also export this data if you wanted to. It'd be a lot of data, but you can export it. And that is the disclosure form dashboard. Let's move to the projects dashboard. All right, so here we have the projects dashboard. So this is a high-level view of, if I'm an AV, this is a high-level view of all of my projects. I'm going to see all of my CS projects here listed. And something to note is that in order for projects to be visible on the screen, they have to be Part 1 verified, Part 2 verified, and ICC approved, pending or approved. Yeah. So again, here is a list of my projects. I have some sample projects, Solar Project 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I can also see which designees have been assigned to this project. So you can see that D3476, this designee can can not only view subscriptions in this project, but they can also subscribe to this project. But then if you move down here to project number 5, you'll see that there are no designees assigned to this project. Also, if there are multiple designees assigned to this project, you would have the ID followed by a comma, and then you'd see the next ID followed by a comma, and so on and so forth. Yeah, just scrolling off to the right, you would see the totals subscribed on each project, the percent subscribed on each project. And let me scroll more. Yeah, so this is all relevant information to each project. Going back to here, I wanted to show you, I wanted to show you how to view the subscriptions that have been subscribed to each of these projects. So if, let's say you want to see, hey, I want to see all the subscriptions for Solar Project 2. I would click on Solar Project 2, the row, and then I would drill down into that by pressing this View Subscriptions button. And so that is going to take me to a different page. And this page is very similar to the subscriptions page, but it's a drill down view of each project. And so here you would see a list of disclosure forms or subscriptions that have been subscribed to the project that I just drilled down into. Yeah. So I'm going to go back to my projects dashboard. So I'm going to jump to the project delegation dashboard right here, because what I want to show you is I want to show you how we would add a designee to Solar Project number 5. So let me navigate to our new project delegation dashboard. And here, again, as an AV, I'm going to see all of the projects that are related to my AV ID. And so these are all projects that I own. And so what I can do here is I can see, again, you can see per project which designees are assigned to it. But let's say I wanted to assign a designee to Solar Project 5. What I would do is I would press here, and then I would see this pop up. On this pop-up, you would see all of the eligible designees that are associated to my AV account. You would also see all of the assigned designees, designees that have already been assigned to this project. And then you would see a column showing history, any history of adding a designee to a project or removing them from a project. You would see that history right here with a timestamp. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add D3476 designee to this project. And once I click add, you'll see that the designee moved from this column to this column. So they were eligible before, now they're assigned. And that is it. That is how we grant designee permissions to not only view my projects, but to also subscribe to my projects. All right, let's close that window. Now let's go back to this projects page, and you will see that this is now populated where it wasn't before. All right, so that is the projects delegation dashboard. Now let's go to the main dashboard, the subscription dashboard. As I mentioned before, this is where all of subscriber management, literally the management part of subscriber management is going to be done. It's going to be done on this page. So here, I see a list of all my subscriptions that are subscribed to my projects. I have a filter right now. I'm filtering by my vendor ID because I only want to show these two for now. But yeah, you can see the list of all subscriptions that you have visibility to or that are subscribed to your projects on this page. Let's start at the top. So at the top, we have this toggle button. This toggle button will allow you to view unsubscribed disclosure forms as well. So right now we're looking at subscriptions or disclosure forms that are subscribed. Let's say I wanted to see disclosure forms that are not subscribed, because really those are the ones that we're going to want to, work with. So I'm going to press this toggle button, and you'll see that it kind of just unhides all of the unsubscribed disclosure forms. Disclosure forms, again, that are ready to be subscribed. Untoggle that so that we don't have too much information. And I'm going to focus on these two subscriptions right here. All right, so looking at these two subscriptions, you can see I can scroll all the way to the right. This is very similar to the disclosure form, dashboard, but these represent subscriptions. These are now subscriptions. And I scroll all the way to the right, and you can see that that column that says, is disclosure form archived? No. Again, we're seeing confidential information here because I am on a scrambled server right now for this demonstration. However, if you were an AV or designee, you would see the actual information. However, and I'm going to cover this later on, I, as an AV, will see any disclosure form or all disclosure form data that is associated to my projects. However, we do have situations where there will be multiple designees working on one project or subscribing to one project. And while they will have visibility to those subscriptions, any PII data will be redacted from them, so it would show blank. And I'll show you an example of that later. But let's go back to the very beginning and let's talk about how do we subscribe in subscription management. So the first step would be you would set your filters. Filtering is very important. There are tens upon tens of thousands of records in the portal, the subscription records. And if you were to work or not filter, you would have to dive through a lot of data to get what you need. However, I highly suggest that you use the filters, find your data, target it, and then export that data out. So you can do that by pressing this export button. And when you press that export button, you're going to be prompted with this pop-up. And essentially what this pop-up is it's asking you to create a name for this report that you are exporting. So I'm going to say it's test2, and I'm going to export that. And so one thing to note is that when you export out a report here, it doesn't instantly export out to your computer to be generated. So instead, we created this queue where when you request a report, it actually puts it in the queue and it starts working on it in the background. And so here you can see a list of reports that I have generated in the past, and you can see that the one that I just generated is ready to be downloaded. So it's one extra step. However, I believe that it's better to have it this way rather than having a spinning wheel for up to a minute and just you being stuck on a page waiting for your report to be downloaded. So let's take a look at what got downloaded. So I'm going to download this test2 report here. So it's downloaded. I'm going to open it up. It's opening up. It's opening up on the side here of my computer. Oh, there it is. When you export this data, you're not only exporting the data itself, you're exporting it in the template format that you would use to make changes. For example, if you want to terminate, you can just terminate. And then there are two other fields that you would have to update here, but then you would, let's say I want to terminate this record here. I would save it and I would import this file right back in and it would terminate that subscription. So I'm going to close this because that is not how I want to show you how to terminate a subscription. I'm going to do that in a second. But I did want to show you the report queue and show how it it generates and holds your reports for you. Let's go back to the subscription page. So that was the export button. let's talk about the update subscriptions. All right. So when you press update subscriptions, it's going to prompt you for a file. So before I get into this, I just want to note that when we initially conducted our market research, we found that AVs and designees wanted to update and manage subscriptions in bulk. They didn't want to do it one by one. And initially we were going to design it so that, you'd go to a record and then you would terminate and then you would add a new record. But really that was a very time consuming process. And we quickly realized that it was more valuable to be able to do make changes in bulk, 100 records at a time, 200 records at a time. And so that is the approach that we took. And so similar to creating disclosure forms with a CSV template, you are creating subscriptions with a CSV template. And again, I showed you that template a second ago, but I'm going to show it to you again. So I can download that template here by pressing that download button, and the template will appear. All right, so this is the identical template that we saw like a minute earlier with that exported data. So it's the same format, it just had data populated in rows 6 and 7. So this is the template that you would use, or a subscriber agent would use, to make changes and edits and terminations in to subscriptions. This is the template right here. Now, rather than fill that out live, I have some test files here. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a subscription. So I have some test files here. Test create. And I'm going to press import. Oh, let me show you what that record looks like. So let me, before I open it up, I'm going to show you that template right here. Okay, so as you may recognize, this is the template information at the top. This row number 6, contains all of the information that I would need in order to create a new subscription. So right off the bat, you would see that you would need the project ID, you would need the disclosure form ID, you would need to include the status of active, you would need the size of this subscription, the date of the size effective date, the type, the choice ID, and date subscribed, subscriber sent to utility. So this is the data that you would need in order to create a subscription. So I already have that here. I'm going to close that, and I'm going to move this, and I'm going to import that in. Something interesting and something that we included is this warning message here. So right here, you will see if you intend to make edits, you will know right away if your changes or that Excel template has any errors. Here we can see that I have 0 errors, but this is kind of a warning message letting you know, hey, you have 0 failures. Do you wish to proceed? Obviously, yes, in this case. However, let's say that you forgot to include some information. This warning would let you know that there is one row that's going to fail, and it's that it's per subscription. Each row represents a subscription. So it would warn you, hey, this is going to fail. Do you wish to proceed? One of the enhancements that we're working on right now, and that we hope to have in place fairly soon by March 3rd, will be to include the failed description of what's going to fail right here on this screen. We don't have that here for this test, but we will have that later. In this case, we know that this is going to pass validation, so I am going to proceed. All right. So I just added a subscription, and I believe that subscription is right here. This is the subscription that I just added. All right. Now, yeah, so that is how we create a subscription. Now we're going to edit a subscription. So let's say I want to change the size of this subscription. So I'm going to go to this file right here. And let me just show you what it looks like before I initiate it or import it. Again, you would have to have the project app ID, disclosure form ID, and then this is wrong. This should be active. And let's say I wanted to make a change. Let's say I wanted to change it to 15 kilowatts. So let's import this file in. Let's make a size change edit. So I'm going to close that out. I'm going to go to update subscriptions. I'm going to choose that file that I just was working on. And it's this one right here. And I'm going to import that in. Oh. All right, so there we are. I imported that file, or the system evaluated that import file. It found that there are 0 rows that will fail validation. Do you wish to proceed? And if I proceed, so that would have changed the size of the disclosure form that, or the subscription that I just imported. All right, so the next thing is we're going to terminate this record. We're going to terminate this subscription right here. So let's open up that test file. See what that looks like. So when you terminate a record, you are going to need the termination status. You are also going to need to know the subscription, the date terminated. So let's say it's 2/13/2025. Also a termination reason. And that is all you need. So let's save that. Let's close it. And let's import that file in. All right, we know that 0 rows will fail validation. That means the change that I'm going to make is going to pass our validations, and I'm going to proceed. All right, this record right here, or this subscription should show terminated. And maybe I just need to refresh my screen. Yeah, so it's terminated now. All right. Now, what I want to show is a termination that fails the validation. So something's wrong with the file that I'm importing, and the system's going to catch it, and it's going to say, "Hey, this is going to fail validation. Do you want to proceed?" And then I'm going to go ahead and proceed, and then I'm going to find out what's wrong with my file. So let's import that file. I've already created it, and I believe it's missing a date. So I'm going to open it. I'm going to import it. Okay, here we go. So 1 row will fail validation. Do you wish to proceed? I'm going to proceed. Okay, so you saw it just downloaded that response file. Let's open that up and let's see what's wrong. All right, I'm going to maximize this. Enable editing. Okay, so right away, this looks like the file that I just imported, which is great because I can just fix this and re-import it back in. However, something that I want to show you is in the very first column on the row where your data is, there is a message here that the system is going to give us. And here, this message is going to tell us why this change failed the validation. So column 27, this column right here, date must be between the subscription size effective date and today and in this format. So I essentially forgot to put a date in row 20 or column 27. And so the validation is telling me, hey, put a date here, re-import it, and you'll be fine. So that is how you would know how to catch an issue that you're having if you're not able to if you're failing the validation. So you would essentially go to the column where that validation failure occurred, and then you would read this message right here, and then you would fix that, and then you would re-import it. Let me go back. All right. Now that we're on this template here, I did want to point out the validations. So one of the unique things about this CSV template is that it includes what's required in the template file itself. So normally a CSV template would show the column name, but in addition to the column name, we're showing you instructions for that column. We're also showing you what's required in that column. For example, let's go back to column 27. Is column 27 required? Only if 25 is terminated. So if 25 equals terminated, then you need a date here. Yeah. So that's how the validations work. Again, here we have a yes is required. And so let's see when it's required. Oh, so it's asking for a number. And it's a text. So it's a text with 50 characters. This validation right here on column 31st is a dropdown. And so it's only going to accept values from a dropdown, which would be residential, small commercial, large commercial, industrial, and government or nonprofit. So it's telling you exactly what you need to include in this column here. And so that is the beauty of this template, is that not only can you use it to import data, it helps you identify where you're having problems, and it helps you fix your issues. All right. That is subscription management.
Awesome. Well, thank you to Virtual James. We'll get back to the PowerPoint slide here, and I will pass it to Real Life James for some additional details on the functionality.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Let's go to the next slide. All right, let's check out the permissions overview. Next slide. Okay, so this is a high level of the permissions and how they work in subscription management. So let's start with visibility of records. Visibility is based on who owns the record and the AV whose project it's subscribed to. So AVs would be able to view any disclosure form or subscription associated with their projects. This means that AVs would have visibility to all disclosure forms and subscriptions that are associated with their projects. For designees, they can see all disclosure forms and subscriptions on projects they have been assigned to. But all personal identifiable information is redacted from disclosure forms and subscriptions they do not own. All right, let's move to editing records. So the ability to edit is based on who owns a disclosure form record. The system defaults to the AV or designee that initially created that disclosure form. And the designee will only be able to manage subscription records for projects they have been given access to and for records on the disclosure forms that they own themselves. All right, let's move to disclosure form transfers. If an AV or designee wants to view or take ownership of a disclosure form that they did not create, they must initiate a disclosure form transfer. And so to be clear, a disclosure form transfer, it's a transfer of ownership of a disclosure form, and by default, the subscription as well, or the subscription that is associated. And we'll be diving deeper into that in a later slide, but just wanted to give you a high-level view of that. So let's go to the next slide. Here we can see an example of what a redacted record would look like. So here is what a designee who doesn't own a record would see. So they can see all of the PII for subscriptions on disclosure forms that they own. For example, that first column right there, that's what I would see if I own that disclosure form as a designee. However, in the second row, you would see what is redacted, and you would see how all of the PII that is on a disclosure form that is owned by another designee, how that would look like. So it's blank, literally blank. All right, next slide. And let's talk about the disclosure form transfer process. All right, next slide. All right, so this is a high-level view of the disclosure form transfer process. And to be clear, this process changes the ownership of disclosure forms and by effect subscriptions. So if you own a disclosure form, you also own the subscription associated to it. So the first step is for the current owner or authorizer to email the PA. And in this email, you would include the new owner who will be taking ownership of that disclosure form, and they should also be copied on the email. You would also need to provide a description of why this transfer is needed. And then lastly, you would include all of the disclosure form IDs that are getting transferred. The next step is for the potential new owner to provide confirmation that they will accept ownership of these DFs. And so once these emails come in, lastly, the PA will review them and make all the necessary changes and notify all the parties of the changes. And that is how disclosure form transfer process is completed. All right, next slide. All right, so let's take a deeper dive into some of the more common actions that we're going to be using in subscription management. I covered this in the demo, but let's just touch on it again in a little bit more detail. So next slide, please. So on this slide, we can see what the process is for subscription size changes. Your first step is this first box over here to your left, is to filter and export the list of subscriptions you intend to make size changes to. Again, there are thousands and thousands of records. You're going to want to limit that so that you're not downloading huge files, but it's up to you. And once you've exported your list of subscriptions, you would probably want to add some additional filtering in Excel. So we saw how when you export, it puts it into that Excel template. You might want to do some more filtering there as well. Remember your data is being exported in the exact file format that is needed to be imported back in. So you can export, make changes, and import that right back in. So to make a size change, you would need to add the new subscription size and provide the effective date of that change. Those are the two fields that are required, along with some of the other like project ID and disclosure form ID, stuff like that. And lastly, once you've made the changes to that Excel file, you would import that file right back in. And we saw that in the demonstration. It's that easy. All right, next slide. So here we have the process for terminating a subscriber. All right, something to note is that when you terminate a record, you're not deleting it from the list of subscriptions on a project. I think you saw that in the demo. You're simply changing the status of that subscription to terminated. That means you would need to create a new subscription if you are wanting to, for example, move that subscriber or subscription to another project. So the first step would be to filter again and export a list from the subscription dashboard of all the files or records that you intend to work on. Again, you would make any additional filtering in that Excel file as needed. And then to terminate a record, and these are the changes that you would make to the file itself, you would need to change the status of the record to terminated. You would need to add a terminated date, then provide a termination reason. And if there is no reason, I think I saw this question somewhere, if you don't have a clear reason that you're aware of, you can just add NA, not applicable. This is a text field, so it'll accept anything that you type in. And again, it'll be reviewed by the PA. Lastly, you would import that file back in, and you have a terminated record. So that is all. That is subscription management. That is the portal, how it's working. And yeah, just looking forward to implementing that. So I'll pass it back to Alex. Thank you.
Thanks, James. I will pass it now to Jess, who's going to share an overview of available support and resources. Jess.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. I think we wanted to have some of the Q&A before I go into the program support and resources. So do just want to give some time for that. I know we've gotten a number of questions in the chat.
I will read out some of those here. So Carly asked, what are the options for the termination reason? Is it a free entry field? So the termination reason is free entry field. We have a 500 character limit, but you can put any description. Christopher asked that most of these columns appear to be empty in examples, and how do we know which columns need to be populated in the context of subscriber management? And so the import template has several column headers. The header rows give instructions on whether or not the field is required for import, and if so, under what conditions, and what the required data format is. And another one says field type. Many of the fields are from disclosure forms, are not required as they are helper columns. Carly asked if it is recommended that we edit subscription statuses and size, such as size, when changes occur in the utility portal. Keely replied that it is best practice to keep this updated across the course of the year to support daily average subscription rate calculations during the annual report process. However, the portal will only be required to update to support subscriber verification events. Another question was for reporting such as quarterly or part 2, what is being checked by the program for verification since we're no longer using the spreadsheet? Are we replacing the spreadsheet with subscriber management page and making sure all the records match the utility records? So the portal feature is designed to collect, store, and allow AVs and designees to manage subscriber data. The portal is replacing the SharePoint workbooks for the purposes of collecting data. To verify subscribers, the program administrator will use subscriber data reported in the portal and perform the same subscriber verification checks, such as matching subscribers to the utility provided subscriber reports. Another question, if your AV contains multiple projects or is a vendor TBD, how are we able to assign a subscription to a specific project? And so the AV will provide designees access to manage specific projects. If delegated to manage, a designee will have the permission to add subscriptions to those specific project IDs, and a TBD form can be subscribed to any project that a designee is designated to manage. And our final question for this portion, for reporting, such as quarterly or part 2, do disclosure forms that are not in completed status and the subscriber is not subscribed all need to be archived. And so unsubscribed disclosure forms do not need to be archived to support subscriber verification events. However, only completed disclosure forms will be permitted to be used for subscriptions. The portal will not allow a subscription to be imported for a disclosure form that is not completed status. We will only review subscribed disclosure forms for subscriber verification events. So thank you to everyone who has submitted questions so far. Please feel free to continue submitting questions. We'll have another Q&A portion towards the end, but I'll pass it over to Jess to talk about some program resources.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Next slide, please. So approved vendors and designees are encouraged to reach out at any time to the program administrator for support. You can do so by contacting the general admin email, which is admin@illinoisshines.com. This can be used for general program questions and support, such as navigating the portal or any troubleshooting or bugs, as well as sector strategists for each sector. So these contacts can be used for specific questions on TCS, CDCS, EEC Community Solar, or Public Schools Community Solar categories in the program. And then additionally, we will be hosting weekly office hours to support the rollout of this feature. So these will be hosted on Zoom every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Central. And the Zoom link can be found in our weekly program announcements. We've also developed a few program resources, which includes the subscriber management portal feature training guide, which can be found on our website. And then we will be sharing today's webinar presentation slides, the demo recording, as well as a recording of this webinar and the Q&A, which we will publish afterwards at the program website. And I will now pass it back to you, Alex, to facilitate any additional Q&A we may have.
Awesome. Thanks, Jess. I'll take this moment to drop that subscriber management training guide in the chat for everyone. So please feel free to use that as a resource. And thank you to everyone who has submitted questions through the Q&A. If you have not yet submitted a question but would like to, please write your question in the Q&A box, and we will try to get to as many as we can here today. As Jess mentioned, we will publish answers to all questions asked. And if we're not able to get to yours, please be on the lookout for an answer in the published Q&A alongside today's recording and slides. But we do have a couple of new questions. How did we solve the outstanding problem of having mixed sources of disclosure forms for a project? For example, as an SO, we have a developer who source account with disclosure form, and how would we get access? And so the owner of the form who will have permission to subscribe it will be the AB or designee indicated on the form when it's created. If a different entity needs to manage the subscription for that form, a DF transfer can be requested. Does the bulk import template allow for actions to be taken for subscribers across projects as long as the project app ID is assigned within the template? Yes, if the template can be used to import or manage subscriptions across various projects, as long as the user has access to it. For initial verification or quarterly/biannually, will we continue to have the same timelines of ensuring that the portals all are accurate before the program checks for verification? And yes, all the same reporting deadlines, some which are outlined in the rec contracts, will apply. If we have 500 clients in a community solar project, do we need to input the AC every single month for all of them? No, you would only need to input sizes when subscription is created or changed. Does the bulk import template allow for actions to be taken for subscribers across projects as long as the project app ID is assigned within the template? And yes, the template can be used to import and manage subscriptions across various projects as long as the user has access to manage those projects. If a disclosure form that a designee creates makes designee the owner, but any disclosure form that the AB has on a project would need to be formally transferred to us so the designee could view the PII. Does that mean the AB would lose access to the PII, or is a transfer applicable for a third party that is not designee or AB? And so the disclosure form can have an AB owner and a designee owner, so 2 owners in total. So if a form is generated by a designee and specifies the AV ID, both the AV and designee could view all, including PII, and manage the form. And did we solve the outstanding problem of having mixed sources of disclosure forms for a project? For example, as an SO, if we have a developer source account with a disclosure form, how would we get access? The owner of the form who will have permission to subscribe it will be the AV or designee indicated on the form when it's created. If a different entity needs to manage the subscription on that form, a DF transfer can be requested. So that is all the questions we have so far, but please feel free to keep on throwing in questions. And of course, if anyone on the program administration team would like to jump in and clarify any outstanding points, please feel free to do so. Go. A new question here. What is the starting point for subscription management records? Are all complete disclosure forms records. So we are importing all subscriber data up to and including the December 2025 subscriber verification event, and any new Part 2 verifications that will occur through February 2026. Any records that fail portal validations will not be imported. AVs and designees will need to correct and import those records, and we are sending out reports to AVs as applicable later today. So thank you everyone for your great questions so far. And thank you to everyone on the program administrator team for your detailed answers. We're happy to keep on answering questions for the next 20 minutes, so please feel free to keep on including those. Here's a new question. Will there be an option added to download multiple disclosure forms at the same time? And yes, you can download all disclosure forms at the same time.
Hey, Alex, this is Keely. I'm just going to come off mute and answer a couple of questions here that have come in because it's faster than trying to type the responses. So there's a question here, how long do approved vendors and designees have to correct records? So after the initial import, the next kind of major reporting deadline for most projects will be June 10th. So there will be some time to review and correct those records.
Thanks, Keely, for jumping in. Please feel free to do so whenever you want here. We do have a new question. Are the explainer column headers always required when uploading a subscriber spreadsheet? And so the column headers are part of the template and they should not be changed before importing. And how long do AVs and designees have to correct records? After the initial import, the next major reporting deadline for most projects will be June 10th. So there will be time to review and correct those records in the short term here. So thank you to everyone who has used the Q&A box here to ask questions. We're always happy to answer all of your questions as necessary. And as just mentioned, we will be having office hours weekly for the entirety of March with the subscriber management working group team. So please feel free to jump on office hours if you have a specific question, and the program administrator team will be happy to answer. And of course, all of these questions, the slide deck, the recording will all be available on the Illinois Shines website alongside the training guide. And so do subscription records need to be updated for the 2025-2026 program year only? And so it would be best practice to update historical records, but the upcoming annual report will primarily review subscribers from the 2025-26 delivery year.
Alex, I'll just jump in. A question came in about office hours being sent out, or do stakeholders need to register for them? Those are open each Wednesday at 10 a.m. Central Time, and no registration is necessary. And as mentioned earlier, just check the program announcements for the link there, but no registration needed.
Thanks, Mike. We got a question here about there is a plan for addressing disclosure forms which were submitted without signatures during the 2023 leniency period. And so if you have forms that are submitted during the leniency period, please reach out to us so that we can review and coordinate with you on those specific forms.
Yeah, I see one last question here. How will the current subscriptions be handled for the initial data? So we're working on getting everything imported, like records for all time that have been reported to the program up through the December 2025 data collection for the semi-annual verification. Um, and so that will be our initial import, and then we will have another data import for any currently in progress Part 2 verifications, so that we can get those wrapped up. And with outside of that, any records that have data validation errors will not be imported into the portal. So just as an example, the portal will check that the disclosure form is in a completed status. Or that there's a termination date if it's terminated, things like that. So if there's missing or incomplete data, those records will not be imported. And we're actually sending out a report to approved vendors today regarding any rows of data that will not be imported. And approved vendors and their designees, as applicable, would need to work to get those records corrected and imported after the portal goes live.
Yeah, thank you, Keely. I also wanted to add that when we go live, we're going to have an actual cutover where the SharePoint folder will not be accessible. Well, it will be in a read-only state, and then all of the information that was in SharePoint will be migrated to the portal. And so there will be a hard cutover where changes will not be able to be made in SharePoint anymore. They'll have to be made in the portal. So that's when we go live.
Thank you, Keely and James. We got a couple more questions here that we'll read out. Can we assign any AC we want? At the start of the project, we will have production enough to cover or offset 100% of consumption. But after we fill all our capacity, we can only offset maybe 50% of consumption. Do we need to change every time we make this decision? And so subscriber agents will be able to assign any AC size to subscriptions as long as it doesn't exceed the project totals. When or if there are size changes later, they must be updated in the portal. How will current subscriptions be handled for the initial data? And so we are importing all subscriber data up to and including December 2025 subscriber verification event and any new Part 2 verifications that occur through February 2026. Any records that fail portal validations will not be imported. AVs and designees will need to correct and import those records. And we are sending out that information later today. I'd also like to highlight that on the portal updates page of the program website, there is the AV action items. And so the go live date, we are planning to go live in early March, and we'll send out a program announcement to notify stakeholders when that occurs. Not seeing any more open questions. I'll give it about a minute if anyone else has any questions. All right, well, if there are no more questions, we will move on to our final slide. And so thank you to all of the program participants for attending today's session. We appreciate you taking the time to participate in this process. We'll be available by email and at office hours times to provide any further support as needed. But thank you all and have a wonderful rest of your day.